What's up everyone, Ben with the BTC Sessions here, and this is your daily session.
Hodl that Bitcoin.
Before we dive into everything, of course, big shout out to sponsors of the show, Ledn.io. This is where you can use your Bitcoin for a couple of different services. The first of which is to obtain a Canadian or US dollar loan using your Bitcoin as collateral. The second of which is a Bitcoin savings account where you can earn interest on your Bitcoin paid in Bitcoin. For either of those, you can click the links down below in the show notes. And if you opt to get a loan, then they will credit your account with an additional $50 worth of Bitcoin. And secondly, if you use Bitcoin, then of course, privacy is important. And one of the things I use to help me out is NordVPN. I use this on my phone and on my laptop. And what it does is it helps mask your IP address, it encrypts your browsing data, and it also has the added benefit of unlocking geo-blocked content. So if you want to check that out, there's a link down below where you can get a deal that gives you the service for only $3 per month. And with that, let's dive into the news. First up, we have somebody from Vaneck trying to tackle the misinformation around centralization of Bitcoin ownership. Now, the name Vaneck should be familiar to you if you were watching yesterday. This is one of the entities looking to get a Bitcoin ETF approved, and the countdown has begun for that. They are going to get a definite decision, either approval or denial, by mid-October. So let's dive into centralization of Bitcoin ownership and how some of the metrics used are really just not great. Now, first off, we should take a look at risk and reward. It's very well known in investing in general. If you take a greater risk, then the potential rewards should reflect that. And in the case of Bitcoin, this was very, very clear. Back in 2009, when Bitcoin started, it was essentially a giant experiment with no value. So if you were putting your time, your effort, your money into it, you really didn't have much of a guarantee that anything was going to pan out. But if you stuck around, well, you've been handsomely rewarded. If you fast forward to today, well, Bitcoin has a track record of a decade of not going down. And so while there are potential gains in the future, that risk reward profile has been adjusted quite a bit. Well, if we dive into a little bit of how the centralization of ownership of Bitcoin is based around this, well, again, those people that got in early, yes, they were rewarded with a lot of Bitcoin. But that may not be necessarily a bad thing, and that may not hold up over time. So first off, let's take a look at how some of this is measured. And oftentimes people will cite the distribution of Bitcoin across all addresses, which is a terrible metric. Why? Well, because one address can represent multiple people, or you can have an individual that has multiple addresses. So the more extreme versions of this would be if perhaps an exchange is representing millions of customers. Well, that doesn't really reflect upon the economy as a whole, because again, millions of people referenced in a single wallet address, whereas you could have somebody that has multiple addresses with their Bitcoin spread out over a lot of different ones, and many addresses become abandoned over time and may just have dust in them. So it doesn't really make sense to be referencing all of these addresses because they are more or less disposable. Beyond that, let's take a look at the coins that are currently on the market. Well, a lot of those are actually presumed to be lost. People have destroyed accidentally or lost, misplaced, burned their private keys to their Bitcoin wallets. And so those coins are essentially off the market and shouldn't necessarily be counted in the distribution of coins amongst users. Now, when we're talking about distribution, we should talk about how the coins are distributed. As I said, every individual has the opportunity to mine Bitcoin if they choose to do so. It is a very competitive market, but everybody at all times always has that same bar that they have to reach in order to obtain more coins. Having lots of Bitcoin does not mean necessarily that you will gain more Bitcoin. You still have to hit that bar for proof of work in order to mine Bitcoin. If we compare this to the legacy financial system, well, the creators and custodians of the money are the ones that get the money first and then lend it out at interest. So they have this kind of unfair advantage where, because they're issuing the money, they get the money first, and they are not as exposed to the inflation because they're the first ones to spend it into the economy. When you have somebody that has Bitcoin, well, the thing is, again, there's that bar to entry in order to obtain newly created Bitcoin. And if you have Bitcoin, again, because it doesn't guarantee you to get new money after the fact, well, eventually you're going to have to spend that money, and that spending redistributes it out to the rest of the economy. So on its base layer, I would argue that Bitcoin is way more fair than the current system when it comes to distribution. It's just we're so early in the days that, of course, there's going to be a concentration of Bitcoin from the early days, but that will be further distributed over time. So yeah, I think that honestly, it's a non-issue, and that a lot of the metrics that are thrown around out there are just more or less total garbage. So hats off to the guys at Vaneck for trying to tackle some misinformation. Up next, it appears that a Chinese Ponzi scheme has at least partially been responsible for the recent dump in Bitcoin price. Now, this Ponzi scheme popped up in mid-2018, and from then to now, it managed to milk 200,000 Bitcoin and 800,000 Ethereum out of its investors. Since mid-July, there have been chunks of those coins being sent out to exchanges and dumped on the market, again, possibly contributing to the downward pressure on price. Now, a number of perpetrators of this scam have been arrested and sent to jail by the Chinese police, but with the movement of funds, it seems to show that a number of the perpetrators are still at large and able to access the funds. There have been calls to blacklist these coins and these addresses from exchanges, but I really think that that approach is opening up a big can of worms. One of the more important issues with Bitcoin, I believe, moving forward will be fungibility. How do you guarantee that this Bitcoin is equal to this Bitcoin? You don't want funds entering your wallet that could potentially taint all of the rest of your coins. And so do we put up with blacklisting? I don't think so. I don't think that this is something that should be done. Again, people are free to do what they like, but this is why I think things like CoinJoin via Wasabi wallet are so important. CoinJoin intermingles your coins with other people's so that it is more or less indecipherable who holds what, and the reasoning behind this is that if we taint all of the coins, then none of the coins are tainted. People will either have the decision to accept Bitcoin or don't accept Bitcoin, versus trying to track UTXOs and say, this is bad, this is good, I want this coin, I don't want this one. Imagine going to a store and having a $20 bill and the storefront owner saying, oh, we won't accept that $20 bill because we think somebody used it for something crime related before you. Probably not a type of economy you want to be a part of. So I guess we'll move forward, but if you want to check out more about CoinJoin and Wasabi Wallet, I did a tutorial on that. I will be sure to link that down below. Ripple is going to be gifting, aka dumping, 1 billion XRP onto the market to help spur online content creation with a number of partners that they have. Now, I always find it funny when articles like this come up and the XRP army hails it as incredible news for a few reasons. Number one, it's super easy to look good and virtue signal by giving away money when you're the one that printed the money in the first place at zero cost. Number two, this is inflation. This will have a downward pressure on the price. Remember that Ripple Labs holds damn near 60% of all outstanding XRP tokens, and they've been dumping them regularly, which is why you've seen terrible performance out of XRP this year. And with this 1 billion XRP dump, a lot of that stuff is going to be converted, I imagine, and it's only going to further suppress the price. And third, this is for surezies an illegal security, and as such, investors should be pissed. And finally, regulators in the UK have sanctioned Bitmex from advertising in the Times because of an advertisement they put up on January 3rd for Bitcoin's 10th birthday. Now, what was the ad in question? Well, it was essentially a logarithmic chart of the price of Bitcoin since inception, with the caption stating that Bitcoin's first block referenced an article in the Times, and it turns out it was a big deal. Now, what was the pushback for this article? Well, a logarithmic chart essentially is an easier way to get a picture of exponential moves in price, or in anything, but in this case in price. And so as such, a scale on the side might go from 1 to 10, then 10 to 100, then 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000. So each jump in the scale is an exponential move. And their argument was that this is too complicated for readers to understand, and they may be fooled into believing that Bitcoin is actually less volatile than it has been. Now, I may have understood this argument if the X and Y axis did not have any information on them, but they did. It's clearly stated there, like, here's the price, here's the time frame, and this is what the price did. So just looking at it, if you take more than a couple seconds than just looking at the line going up, and you look at the axes, you get all of the information necessary to understand what's happening. So I guess essentially what the Times is saying and what the regulators are saying are that readers are not intelligent enough to take more than a few seconds to actually read what's in front of them, maybe. Now, I've seen some calls on Twitter for Bitmex to take out a second ad in the future when we surpass previous all-time highs and have it as a linear graph to show how arbitrary this sanctioning was and how ridiculous it was that they were not allowed to post this ad. Now, keep in mind that the sanction is just around placing the specific ad that they placed. They're not allowed to put that ad in again, which, okay, I guess, but it opens up the possibility to them posting that linear scale in the future, which would be hilarious. Bitmex, please do that. And with that, I'm going to finish up here. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here, of course, hit like, subscribe, and share. Always share. It's great to have more eyes on this content. If you'd like to help the show in another way, you can hit up either of the sponsors, Ledn and Nord. The links are down below. And if you really enjoyed what you saw, you can always hit up me with a Bitcoin Lightning Network tip at my tippin.me page. With that, I am out. I will see you guys tomorrow for your daily session.